Her Journey to Healing, Reaching Women with a Desperate Cry is an 8-week Zoom seminar in which Kamala and Winston help women to start living their best life by rediscovering the image of God in their life. Kamala, a licensed marriage and family therapist, joins her husband of 16 years, an ordained pastor, to marry the clinical and the spiritual. You will begin living your best life filled with love, joy, and peace. Register at kwministries.net for this life-changing seminar.
So anxious resistance. Now remember there were 4 categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anxious resistant kids were on the opposite end of the spectrum. They didn't have a lot of self-confidence. They really clung to their caregivers, whether it's parents. When I say caregivers, I mean parents, grandparents, just old people in their lives who were, really part of that initial bonding experience. For these kids, they tended to have really exaggerated emotional reactions to stuff, but they also kept the distance from their peers. How did this translate into adulthood? That translated into anxious, preoccupied adults. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of formed less secure bonds with partners and feel really desperate for love and affection.
God is patient. God is kind. God is long-suffering. God never fails. God always hopes. God always trusts. God always perseveres. God doesn't envy. God doesn't boast. God doesn't seek his own, but is always seeking what's best for you. God rejoices in the truth.
That's right.
God doesn't define love. God demonstrates love.
Come here, Job. Let me ask you a question. What did you go through, Job? Well, I lost my children. I lost my livestock. Sores covered my body. So, Job, what was happening? Why were you going through all of this? You see, God had approached Satan and said to him, "Have you considered how faithful Job is?" Then Satan challenged God with, "Well, he's only faithful to you because you give him stuff." God laughed and said, "Do whatever you want to do with Job. Don't kill him, but watch him give me glory." What are you going through? What if whatever you're going through is to give God glory? What if whatever you're going through, whatever pain you're feeling, whatever suffering you're enduring, whatever challenge you're having, is to give God glory?
The Holy Spirit is the one that guides you through life, and as long as you are sealed by Him, as long as you have Him and it is evidence that you have Him, you are safe. What's the evidence? We told you before. Galatians 5 verses 22 and 23. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's the fruit of the Spirit. That's the evidence that we have the Holy Spirit in our lives. And, friends of mine, when we have the Holy Spirit in our lives, we are safe. There is now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, to those who walk by the Spirit. Romans 8 verse 1.
Good evening and welcome to another Monday Night Live with KW, and we're missing Jay tonight.
We are missing a letter indeed.
Pastor Gibson could not be with us tonight. However, he sends his love and says he really wishes for us a really, really good show tonight, which I believe we're going to have. And I'm so excited that you could join us, because if it's Monday night,
You are live with KW.
thank you very, very, very much for being here. It's Monday. It's Celebration Monday. What are you celebrating tonight?
I am celebrating life. I am celebrating life, and I'm celebrating clear-mindedness.
Ooh, clear-mindedness. That's something to celebrate. The ability to think and make decisions and not be hindered, not be distracted, and that's something to celebrate.
I actually remember something significant about this. I remember being a child, and my mom would always say, "Thank God for being in my right mind."
Yeah.
Being a kid, I'm not really studying that. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that really means when she said it. But as an adult,
We praise God for being in our right
praise
mind.
God for being
That
in
was
our
good.
right, because it's
That was
not
good.
necessarily
It's not a
promised.
guarantee. And it's not every day. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Well, can I tell you what I'm celebrating today? I'm celebrating prayer. No, I am. I'm gonna tell you why. This morning I got up and I just saw something ugly. When I say ugly, I read something really ugly in the paper. And I just cried out to God. And I was like, God, you got this. You're in control. Hear our cry. And it was still ugly, but the stress of it came off of me. And so I'm celebrating prayer. The song says, "Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we don't take everything to God in prayer and trust Him that He is big enough. He loves us. He sees around the corner." And so I'm just grateful to God that with all the stressors of life, with all the stresses of our daughter, sickness of our daughter, raising children is not fun. It is fun. It's not easy. um, uh, all of that, I can take all of that to God and know that He's real. He's big enough. So I'm really celebrating prayer tonight. I'm celebrating prayer tonight. Good evening, Brother Glenn. What are you celebrating? Good night. What are you celebrating tonight, sir? And what are you out there celebrating tonight? So I'm really excited about tonight. What are we doing here on Monday nights?
So on Monday nights, guys, we like to come together and we just like to talk life with people. And one of the things, excuse me, that we have discovered in our 2+ years,
Almost 3 years,
in doing this, is that we can relate to each other quite a bit. And being able to relate to each other, being able to hear each other's stories really helps us get through. Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
And out of our own story, all of us have stories. And of course, being married, we have a collective story. And some chapters weren't that pretty.
And that's not uncommon. And being able to have vulnerable conversation, being able to have transforming conversation, being able to share our desperate cries.
There we go.
Is something that we found to be helpful to us, this kind of collectively, and to us collectively.
And so we want to reach people with a desperate cry.
Now, the other thing that we're also doing here on Monday nights is that we want to encourage you to visit our store, www.
We want to reach you through our store.
Absolutely. But we want for you to jump onto that website. It's right at the bottom of your screen. We have a host of devotional series, therapeutic books about people's experiences. We've got a seminar series that's even available through here in Journey to Healing that we would love for you to check out. And we'd love for you to check it out because it's our stuff. But we'd also love for you to check it out because
it's quality stuff. It's really, really, really good stuff. You can also book an appointment with Kamala there. Those spaces are very limited. Those spaces are very, 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 very limited. And so, but you can still try. Brother Glenn says he is celebrating being alive at this time to see his daughter and his son-in-law making their mark in this world and blessing others. We are celebrating with you, Dad. We really, really are. And Dad, let me say this to you real quick. We don't take you following us being on here every Monday night for granted. We genuinely, genuinely appreciate you. And thank you very, very much. We have a returning guest.
We do.
And that's always good, especially someone in his field who is busy, who he doesn't have anything to do while he's here. But we had such a great conversation last time Sheriff Richardson was here. And we're just so grateful tonight that he is back with us. And we're looking forward to part 2 of this conversation. And we believe it's even going to be better. So you're going to bring him in, please. And Sheriff Richardson is a newly re-elected sheriff. So congratulations, sir. We are celebrating you tonight, and we thank you for your work. On mute, Sheriff. You're muted.
We're better now.
There you go. We're celebrating you tonight. I know campaign seasons can be, well, I know. I imagine campaign seasons can be just that, campaign seasons, but that's behind you. The people have given you their support, and I can imagine why you genuinely care about them. So tell us real quick. Go ahead.
Before we jump in, you said, Sheriff genuinely cares about you.
Mhm.
And I think back to our previous conversation.
Mhm.
And Sheriff Richardson, I wanted to share this with you because this popped up on my timeline, post on Facebook and old memories. And I
Right.
saw, and I was so struck by it because it made me think of you from our last time. And it was this quote by Mr. Rogers. But what he said is, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. To this day, especially in times of disaster, I remember my mother's words, and I'm always comforted by realizing there's still so many helpers, so many caring people in this world. And I thought that was very befitting for you based on our conversation the last time. So thank you
Well, I
so
appreciate that. That's definitely a compliment and a blessing to hear. And it makes me think, as you were reading that, of so many people that I get to do life with every day. So that's a
Yes.
quote.
And I am definite. That was good. That was really good. What are you celebrating today, Sheriff? What are you? So, I think, I don't know if we shared it with you last time, but every Monday when we first started all those many years ago, we would, on Mondays, we would talk about our woes. Oh, Monday was mundane. Monday was horrible. Monday blues. And, we decided, no, we're changing that. And so we've been celebrating Monday. We've been finding stuff to celebrate. What are you celebrating today, sir?
I'm celebrating the slowdown. Like you said,
I bet you are.
the campaign season. I don't know that it's a season anymore. It's kind of it feels like a year. Prior that you spend doing that. But with that said, I'm celebrating being able to focus on the small things, to be able to appreciate the small things again, instead of being in such a rush every day. And sometimes you forget to appreciate just a little bit of a slowdown. And I'm certainly thankful and appreciative to just be able to see the small things.
Awesome. Brother Glenn said, congratulations, Sheriff. I think you're doing a great job. May God bless you and your family.
Thank you so much
for what you're doing. We thank you so much for that comment. I want for us to go straight into talking about community policing. And well, let me ask you, can you update us on your project of having people creating a profile with you so that people who are immobile for whatever reason they are,
Sure.
creating a profile with you so that when they're stopped, they can be easily recognized so we don't have any mishaps. How is that going, and how is it going in spreading the word?
It's going great. We're on the final days of receiving our state funding that will allow us to expand that, throughout the state. We finished everything that we need to do to receive that, but we've not slowed down from that expansion. We've actually, we've continued to do it, whether we had the money or not, and so we've been able to continue that expansion. I think we're up to 9 parishes now. And as we get that money, it will allow us to do it, at a much faster rate. We've actually got a few other agencies that are partnering with us to help us expand it even quicker. And my hope and my prayer is that by mid-year this next year that we're in all 64 parishes in the state.
Because that's going to save, I'm sure it has already, but that's going to save lives. And the challenge with projects like that, you don't necessarily see, the news doesn't cover, because it can't, what doesn't get done. See, it
Right.
doesn't cover the person that wasn't killed. It doesn't cover the incident that didn't happen,
Right.
because it didn't happen. And so there's really no way to measure how many people. You can measure how many people you check, but there's no way to measure what incidents would have been prevented. But
Sure.
we should be grateful to know so many incidents have happened, and this is going to really, 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 really save lives. And so we just want to say thank you for that. Again, I know we said that last time, but from there now, I want to dive into community policing. I'm Black and you're white, and I think that's a great conversation and authentic conversation for us to have. Historically, the Black community is not necessarily crazy about the police. Do you understand that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. That comes from, I think, many years of, even as far back as segregation, when law enforcement were the enforcers of even just segregation. I think that would be probably the most recent, I guess, defining moment of physical separation, and who had the responsibility when that was happening to create the to create it. And so I would say that, recognizing that, and it's the same as, someone who is Caucasian that's raised to have a bias towards those of other color. They're raised with that perception, and many times don't know why. But it doesn't take away the perception. And just as generationally over the last many years, which segregation, we're not talking 200 years ago, we're talking, I mean, my mother, was in school when everybody was integrated, and so we're not talking about some
Hundreds of years.
Christopher Columbus days, we're
Right.
talking just not too long ago. And so we've come a long way in such a short amount of time. But one of the things that we have to focus on is, again, I said this in our last interview, is one, you have to recognize it. You can't ignore it or pretend it doesn't exist. And regardless of your own thoughts, recognize that it's there and that you have a responsibility. If you want to do effective law enforcement and effective community service, then you have to, again, recognize it and address it in a way that builds and creates trust. And as we spoke last time, it's interjecting yourself in the community in ways that's not always in a law enforcement capacity. It is, you build those relationships outside of times of conflict, and that's and I would say that is the, in such a small way of recognizing it, but that is what community policing is in a nutshell. And it's a constant, daily, not when it's convenient, not when it's just election time, not when it's not when times of turmoil are upon us, and conflict and separation. Those aren't the times to while yes, you should be working through those times as well. Oftentimes people are not hearing you right in those times. And so the importance of creating those relationships outside of those times, the importance of being present when times are not bad, and when the neighborhood's not having a problem, and creating, you just, it's almost impossible to build a relationship with every police officer. And we don't expect that. Time just does not allow for that. But
Mhm.
uh, by having particular officers and deputies that go into those neighborhoods and become a constant, become a person that if I tell you something, I recognize that I can trust you because I've seen that happen.
Mhm.
That is the most important thing. And presence, I guess, again, that's what we're talking about. It is presence that is consistent and not only just consistent in being visible, but consistent in their interaction.
Mhm.
That's it's just a constant presence in our community. And I know that there's many buzzwords that people use, and there's many tactics that people use, but the main thing that I in my heart that I think is when things do escalate, and oftentimes they do, in our uh, certain communities that that don't necessarily trust law enforcement.
Mhm.
It's it's at that time that you have to be the most cognizant of what you're doing and how what you do is being
Perceived.
perceived, because
Mhm.
perception is reality
Mhm.
Yeah.
um, oftentimes. And so
Mhm.
talking in a manner that is not um, arrogant or
Mhm.
it's just the way that you respect other people.
Mhm.
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 And I think
Mhm.
that's where all the trust will it comes from, is respect.
Yeah.
And so that is the constant.
You talked about respect. Let me ask you a question and then let Kamala dig in here. I actually started the police chaplaincy program in the city of Valdosta, and I served as chaplain there. If you remember, I mean, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was a shooting, I think here in Louisiana, and there was like two in Dallas, and there was this week when this police officers were just being killed for like 1 week straight, about 5 years ago. And I walked into our then chief's office. I introduced you to Brian in text,
Right.
and right, and Brian said to me, hey, do you still want to be a chaplain? And he grabbed five of us as pastors and so forth and so on, and we started working. One of the things I remember vividly, and I want for you to talk to me about the thin line between this. I remember being at a roll call and the sergeant telling his officers, listen, I know what's being said about you in the news. I know what's happening, but you need to make sure you get home to your family. We will deal with the rest of it later. Let me ask you, because that has to be a delicate, thin line with being safe, with not with a police officer not doing something stupid that will get him or herself killed, while at the same time not overreacting to get somebody else, an innocent person, killed. What explain to me how officers walk, explain to a citizen how officers daily walk that very fine line of protecting themselves, the community, and not overreacting, but not leaving themselves careless, because this is also a split-second decision.
Sure. um, I had a conversation. I don't know, it had to be within the last week, of something of a similar um, basis. And the main point um, that I tried, or that we were making there, is actually with a state trooper here locally, and he had a trainee with him, and he was on his last day of training. And so we were just talking about, they're struggling to recruit new recruits in law enforcement. You
Mm-hmm.
hear that all over, and a lot of it's to do with the public perception, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the things that have gone on, through time. And obviously, there's always been problems, but we just know about many, many more things
Right.
now, instantly and live often. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And because of that, the perception and can be changed in a good way or in a
Mm-hmm.
bad way. Uh, quite quickly. And so to be aware of that, and that was kind of part of the conversation, was the fact that, that we even we wear I have a my all my deputies have cameras and on their bodies, and they also have a two in their car, and then you just assume that everybody has a video camera with their cell phones, and so there's multiple views of nearly every interaction, no matter how innocent that interaction may be. But part of our conversation was about the duty that we have as law enforcement to help our image is to recognize those people early on who have overreaction or overexcitement oftentimes. And there are individuals that are that have a struggle with adrenaline dumps. They're adrenaline dumps in these situations where there's conflict or some sort of level of resistance. And many times what you find is that there's a history of those same individuals not being able necessarily to control themselves. And whether that's a conscious function or not is almost irrelevant. It is and this is the law enforcement responsibility. It's recognizing that and determining whether that's something that can be fixed. And if it's not, then we have a duty to fix that by removing them. This not every job's not for everybody.
Right.
As opposed to allowing that to escalate to a point at whether that's today, tomorrow, or 3 or 4 years from now. And so that's our duty. But the main, and again, this is another part of the same conversation we just had. The main thing the main tool that we have, we carry, we're now up to wearing load bearing vests with tasers and all these other things on them, and all of those tools that we have. The most important tool that you have on you is your mouth and how you talk to people. And I was given an example of there was an individual that I worked with 20 years ago that if I was in a situation and there were multiple people most of the time where I knew that it could escalate or de-escalate, that it would make me extremely nervous for one of these individuals to come on the scene, because I knew that I could de-escalate it. And I knew that particular individual, the moment that he arrived, we were going to create a problem. And so, that tool that they have, it is teaching them how to talk to, I've arrested people that could have thrown me all over the place and were much stronger than me, but it was how I talked to them that they allowed me, to take them into custody. And we never had to find out whether any of those other intermediate things that I had were necessary, because we didn't have to get to that point. And so it's a fine line of speaking, oftentimes with empathy, and recognizing that, that today is not a normal day for them either. Today is something is going on, and it's, talking to them on a human level to de-escalate that. But also at the same time, implying your authority. I mean, you can't, you don't get the opportunity to completely let your guard down.
Right.
So you have to imply, the authority, but again, it's all in how you speak to someone. Now, there's often situations that's not going to matter, but most interactions with law enforcement are not physical. I mean, there's millions of interactions a day, and
every day.
And I would tell you that there's probably hundreds of those interactions that are dictated specifically by how that officer or deputy or whatever trooper interacts with them. It could go quite simply, or it could turn into a physical altercation. And so I think that's the most important thing that we impress upon deputies. And now that's, a part of required training is, we kind of call it verbal judo is what they called it some years ago. It's de-escalation techniques now, and it's required It is required training now, which is a great thing to have. Used to not be, and so now it's great to have that recognized as a really important tool, to the point that they require officers and deputies to have that. So that's going to be the most important thing.
You know, Sheriff, I'm kind of sitting here just going through this whole thought process about healing the community, and I'm listening to how you're talking through, you know, the officers' kind of perspective and the things that they go through, as well as listening to where we started about, you know, some of the perspectives and things that influence how we interact with each other. And I couldn't help be struck by a question that I want to ask you that I don't know that we ask as often. What do the police need from the community in order to be more effective in their roles?
I think the most basic answer would be support, but that's a very generic,
right? What does that mean?
Non-descriptive answer. And so I think interaction, which again puts it back on the agency to create times for those interactions to take place. And it starts very, one of the places we do a lot with, and tomorrow is an example, we'll be at a school tomorrow doing a Halloween party with special needs children. But those interactions young are oftentimes indicative of how they interact with you later, because as we talked about, a lot of the thoughts that individuals have growing up is impressed upon them by what someone told them.
Right.
So the more that we get to interact and allow them to create their own perception of law enforcement, that is a positive one, then that's definitely the better angle to take. But it's including us, and it can be a church revival. It can be, anything of any nature. It's including us, and I think that is the most important thing that we have. Because what you'll always hear me say, and I say this, this was a campaign thing that I said as well, because it is what I believe, and it is that everything is built around a relationship. Everything, and without a relationship, we don't have anything to build on. And so that is what the community can do for us, is recognize that they have to give us opportunities that otherwise we would not have to build those relationships. And many are different. I know there's lots of agencies that have manpower issues and all of that, and so it's a little more difficult in the times that we're in right now. But anything from a family revival to anything, just allow us to come and be part of that, so that when those, and it can be a tragedy, a car wreck where somebody loses their life, or it can be a problem in a neighborhood that needs to be addressed, whether it be drug problems or violence or things of that nature, that they may feel comfortable enough to call the sheriff's office, but they've reached a point in a relationship that they make that phone call to that person that they built that relationship with. And that's it's getting back to the basic things of just building relationships in communities. And you can do, and we have all of those, the social media tools, and we have all of those things at our fingertips. But the very basic relationship of, kind of like when Pastor Winston, came into my office that day, we stayed and talked for probably 2 hours. And we built a relationship that has now led to this, just because we took the time. He took the time to come see me, and I took the time to have a conversation
and not rush me out of there.
Yeah.
Right.
Which you could have easily said, I'm busy.
Sure. But I think that's important. And it's so simple that sometimes I guess it seems elementary, but I believe everything starts with a relationship.
Yeah.
And so, to answer your question, it is just give us opportunities to build those relationships.
Sister Valentine is saying she and her family are very glad to be a part of the KW Ministers family. We're a blessing to many, and we're sent by God. We appreciate you, Sister Valentine. Thank you so much for your kind words. Tell us how you're celebrating today. Christine is echoing the sheriff. Everything, and let's hashtag this, Annika. Everything is built around relationships. Everything is in their interaction. You have through interaction, you have community. Brother Glenn is saying, excellent. Through interaction, you have community. Let's talk for a second about biases and personal biases and accepting these biases. My friend, Chief Childress and I, we were walking down the street one night, and we were just talking. And I said, and when we shared, we were very, very honest with each other. And we talked about our biases. We talked about our biases that are informed based on movies, that are informed based on stories that we're told, that are informed based on. And so they did a study once where they had three black. They had a black doll and they had a white doll. And we're going to take a quick break and come back. There's a baby that needs attention, and we'll be right back. We'll be right back with you. Just give us a second. We'll be right back. All right, we are back, and Sheriff, we have a 5-year-old son that does that to us all the time.
Absolutely.
So they have this study where they have the black doll and they have the white doll and they have these kids in the room, and everything that was nice was the kids would point to the white doll, and everything that was bad associated with bad. The babies, very young age, would point to the toddlers would point to the black doll. And so Chief and I were talking about our innate biases. Talk to us about that, our innate biases. How do we accept that we have them, and then put a professional, how would you say that, accept that I have my biases, and learn to check my biases at the door. And how do we as citizens accept that we have these biases based on stories we were told about the police officer, but recognize that when we come in touch with the police officer, we're bringing these biases, but how do we check those so that the interaction can be useful and productive?
Sure. And implicit bias is kind of what you're talking about, and that's a specific term that's used often. And it's just a bias that you have, and you may not have, you don't even recognize that you have, and it can be from your upbringing, and if you're affluent, It could be bias towards people who are not affluent. If you're,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't always have to be, a racial bias, but it certainly includes that, and so it's recognizing that everything that has made up your upbringing is included in your thought processes, and oftentimes it's you recognize that you have that, and then you exclude, the training that is done, and we also, that is another required training, is implicit bias training. That is to recognize that regardless of how well thought through you have, tried to think through, all of your patterns, and how you react to people, that there are some level, and it doesn't necessarily have to always be, again, a racial bias,
Mm-hmm.
but it's recognizing that you have them and then excluding them from, and it can be, preconceived notion of something when you stop someone in a in a car,
Mm-hmm.
and that works both ways.
Right.
As you were saying, it's a preconceived notion, uh, that you see often, that if a police officer pulls over an African American young male, that he did that based upon their race, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's overcoming that at some point, uh, and that's a much bigger picture to, and a much bigger um, issue to train the public for that. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I'm not certain, and I wish I could tell you more about how we overcome that. Certainly, it's
Mm-hmm.
been a larger fight, would not be the right word, but it's taken a lot to convince law enforcement that that's a training that should be required. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have luckily achieved that, and
Mm-hmm.
moved past the fact that the training is done and required. But I think it all goes back to, I don't know that we can train the public on their implicit bias, but I think that we can dull those biases, again, through our relationships and our interactions, uh, that can oftentimes go against what those preconceived biases were.
Yeah,
Um,
Mm-hmm.
almost
and
like
that
creating a new experience.
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
New
Yeah, to prove
stories.
the bias is not, and sometimes you may have, if you have a negative interaction with law enforcement, um, that can, I guess you would basically say that can give the bias credit,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then that would, now it makes it even a little bit harder to overcome. That's, I think that's part of the bias, and that's part of the training that we do. That if in our interactions, let's say we have 50 interactions, and we have this implicit bias in us that says that certain people act a certain way or do a certain,
Mm-hmm.
or break certain laws, and and I'm so biased that I forget to also note the interactions that don't include that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and I only recognize the one that does. Well, then now I have given my bias some evidence to back it up, and so the important thing for us, and that's the part of the training, is to recognize those preconceived notions,
Mm-hmm.
um, not allow them to determine or dictate our interactions in a way that would make us treat anyone in a way that we wouldn't treat anyone else. But
Mm-hmm.
without recognizing it, without being aware of it, there's you're not going to make any headway on that. Which is why the training has been so helpful in what we do, and at least it's that is a self-examining. It's one of the few trainings that we have that really is not an ABC. This is how this
Mm-hmm.
is done.
It's a
Training.
hard stuff.
Yeah.
It is self-reflecting, and it
Mm-hmm.
requires you uh, to leave that training and go back and kind of examine yourself and examine decisions that you've made previously and thought processes that you've had previously, and look at whether any of those things have been affected by your bias, or the bias that you didn't necessarily recognize that you had.
That you have.
And then when you recognize that, address it.
Yeah, yeah. And I imagine that would also be a part of, not just that initial training, but, that ongoing experience.
Right.
And then when I think about, ourselves as members of the public, I see where you're going with that in terms of it's difficult to train a public to be aware of those things for themselves. But I would like to imagine that, being able to have conversations like this in public spaces, could help with that.
And let me ask you, and sure, if you're also an ordained pastor, so let me go here, and Kamala, you can guide us here also, is recognizing the humanity in each other. If we could recognize, I think we do such a good job at church of sinning, of condemning, of guilt, shame, and fear, of separation, to where we don't probably do a good enough job of teaching little Billy, little Paul, little Tom, of the humanity that we all share.
Right.
Wouldn't that go far away?
I think it would, because it's that idea of valuing individuals, as opposed to allowing, like we talked about, the perception of who this person might be. My perception. Based on stories, based on biases, based on right. Because a lot of the perceptions that we carry about people, it's not for that individual. It's for you as a group. And the trouble with that is, just like you're saying, it takes away from the humanity of the individual, who may or may not fit that mold. So I think part of our piece in this is, let's give people a chance to prove themselves.
And do you think, Sheriff, the church could be helpful in that way? And in what ways do you think the church could help in, I know, providing an opportunity for law enforcement to build relationships, but what way can the church help in the influencing of community and in influencing a community to build those relationships?
I think as Kamala was saying, I think it is, one is to, I'm not much of a sidestepper when it comes to having a conversation. It's like you can't address the problem if we go around it on the way. And so I think that the most effective way is to just address it as a, it can be a pulpit message of that's exactly as we're talking about. It's that this is not a one-sided situation. It's that we both have struggles, because sometimes I think that law enforcement is often looked at as, I think we forget that we have a lot of different ethnicities serving in those roles, and it's oftentimes looked at as, I believe, as when you say the word police or cops or law enforcement, that it automatically reflects a Caucasian male, and that is not what the ranks of our agencies are made up of these days. And so, as you talk about bias, that is one of those immediate biases that people have towards law enforcement, is that is law enforcement. And so to recognize that, put the humanity of these individuals that are serving, and again, there's across every race and creed and ethnicity, um, that these are the same people whose kids go to school with your kids.
Yeah.
These are the same people who, coach baseball, or the same people who lose their parents, to old age. And I mean, we're literally living the same life.
Lives.
The only difference is where we stand, I guess, in our community, and it does give us different perceptions and different, as you say, biases. But I think that to have that message of humanity, and it can be in many different facets. It doesn't necessarily have to be directed just at law enforcement, but humanity in general, and empathy, that can work both ways. To be empathetic, of even a law enforcement officer, that it's a really, and again, I go back to what I said in the beginning. It's really up to us to see the things happening with our officers and our deputies that could create volatility, where you don't know what's going on in their life either, with certain situations. I mean, they see the worst of the worst, and so it's also recognizing that while it needs to be addressed and it's unacceptable, but this deputy or this officer, we have no idea. Generally the public has no idea. For example, earlier this past week, may have been Friday morning or Saturday morning, we had, may have saw it in the news. We had 4 teenagers in an accident here, that it took us like an hour to get them out of the car, and 2 of them ultimately passed away. And these are 18, 19-year-old kids, and that's
traumatic.
That's a struggle, and that is traumatic. And from that to, seeing really difficult situations, of just normal, and it's not normal, but trauma that happens every day of, you going and delivering a death notice of a parent, or, all of those things that just build and build and build. And then you have that moment where that officer or deputy acts out of character. Not to excuse that.
No.
But that's where I go back to empathy, to recognize that this may, and that's certainly not, I'm not talking violence. I'm talking specifically maybe a negative interaction. Does not excuse that. But, as opposed to today, we take the immediate action of, let me make sure I can get this on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and try to, demonize this person, that while it should be addressed in the proper way, that to create that humanizing, that empathy, of let me deal with them like a person as well,
like a person,
like a human, like I would want my cousin or my brother or my, that's the Christian, and I think that's why the pulpit is such an important place for that. Is we're not interacting with each other just as people. We should be interacting with each other as brothers and sisters.
Yes.
And if we could get to that basic principle, of looking at each other like brothers and sisters, then I think we could solve a whole lot of problems.
A lot of problems. A lot of problems.
You have a passion for being proactive in your approach, and we're almost at time out. So
I know.
I really wanted to ask you this. What are some of the successes that drive you to continue down this path of being more proactive in what you do?
I think it's the advantage of seeing the results. It's much tougher when you live in a city or an area that's hundreds of thousands of people, and I can imagine that you would feel like you're on a hamster wheel oftentimes, because you send the good things out and you never know if you get them back. And I've got the blessing of living in a place where we see the tangible return. We get constant interaction with our kids, or high school students that, even to the point of I have inmates that leave our facility that come back and visit. So they don't do that if they're disrespected or,
Right.
Yeah.
Made to feel like less. And I think we run, there's some people who you're not going to necessarily change their heart before they leave because the problems are much bigger than, and we don't necessarily keep people who are going to prison for the rest of their life in my facility. But,
Right.
we do have people that are doing 5 or 10 years, and we get to know them. We get an opportunity to see their work ethic, to see them again as a human and
Human being.
and in a way that they're not being poisoned by whatever, not only drugs, but their influences that are poison to them as well. We get to see them out of that element and recognize their good qualities. And, and we kind of mama hen them, I guess you would say, we don't want to see you back. You better not let me hear, because I'm going to put extra work into coming and finding you when I hear that you're doing, that kind of talk, kind of like your mama used to tell you, if you go off and you do something bad, I'm going to tell them to take care of you and I'm coming to find you too, that kind of talk. And I think that's why, we, again, I would say it's the tangible return that we get to see that allows, and it's not every day, I would say, but it's often enough that, it kind of just re-energizes what you're doing is making a difference, and it's just knowing that in my community, fortunately, bad things happen just as they do everywhere else. But fortunately, we get to experience the good things probably as much as we do the bad things, and to even just call it even, I guess you would say, is a positive, because that's not what we understand when we watch, the news. Excuse me. That's not what we understand when we get on social media. That's not what we see, because that doesn't positive stories. The news, if you'll notice, I generally don't watch a lot of news, but if you notice, they'll spend 30 minutes on the tragedy and the terrible things, and then they'll run generally one story that's of a feel-good nature.
And they give it a name.
Right.
Yeah. Brother Glenn says the more interaction you have with the youth in the community, it will help to create a better relation with the entire community, because the youth will spread the word around. And then Sister Valentine says to you, sir, it's good to see you, Sheriff, back on the show again. I love how humble you are and how well you are taking out time to explain things to us where it's easy for a child to understand. Thank you, sir. All right, Sheriff. I have one more question for you, and is, will you come again?
Absolutely. I enjoy the opportunity, and I enjoy spending times with you guys and fellowship, and understanding. And I'm grateful for the work that you do. Again, I've had time to kind of flip around on your YouTube channel and learn a little about where your passions are, and also how impressed I am with all of the books you guys have been able to publish. And that's just it's just great to be able to spend time and work through some things, and I appreciate you for even for having me the first time and the second time. So gladly I'll be back as often.
Well, we're grateful to you, because this gives us an opportunity to talk, to listen to perspectives, to get one. What I have learned about life is you can't really hate somebody you know. You can't hate somebody. Well, you can't. No, even if a person is, when you get to know a person and you get to realize they're acting out of trauma, or you get to realize they're acting out of character, which is why we keep harping on relationship. Because when you get to know a person, it's really hard to really hate them. And for you to give us an opportunity to get to know you, you get to know us. Our viewers get to know you, to know us through our interaction. When somebody who was scared of the police sees a Caucasian male police tomorrow, they're thinking about you. They're thinking about something you said. Yeah. They're thinking about something, and so I think this is really good. Really good public service, changing perspectives. And okay, who won our gift tonight? We need to create the drum roll. I say that every time. There we go. Let's see. And our winner, Christy, you have not won. Christina has won several times. You have not won in a very long time. In a very long time.
Congratulations.
Congratulations,
you
Christy.
Know what to do.
You know exactly what to do to get your gift. Sheriff Richardson, we want to tell you thank you so very much, sir, for taking time out of your busy schedule to spend with us, to spend this hour sharing with us how do we build community, how do we some of the powerful things we talk about is recognizing that implicit bias and dealing with it, building those relationships. And what Sheriff said is, let's give our officers the space to get to know us, to create atmospheres where they can get to know us. Because once we can see the humanity in each other, we can then relate better to each other.
We can. One of my takeaways tonight comes back to something that comes up often for us on this show, Sheriff. It's the idea of relationship and people.
Yes.
And we said it again tonight. You can't live life without relationship, no matter what the context is. And we hear it over and over again. I'm hoping that as people listen to our shows, if you are in a place of not valuing relationship and people, I hope that's one of the things that you'll get from us as you continue.
Sheriff, you get the last word.
I agree. I think that relationships are, I feel like I'm a parrot sometimes by being so redundant with saying that. But that is one of the things that I believe the most, and that's why I try to have relationships in as large of as often and anytime there's an opportunity to build that relationship, and they don't have to be built upon years of knowing each other. It can literally be built in 10 minutes of a conversation, but it is a perspective. Relationship is a perspective, and if you do things with intention of building a relationship, I think that you have that perspective to not just look at it as a simple interaction, but to maybe nurture it with a little more care. And so with that, I guess that's what I'll round out with is exactly what the hashtag is. Everything's built around relationships.
That's good. Hey, y'all, if it's Monday night,
you are live with KW
and Jay next week.
Yep.
Peace.